just to remind everyone, if you don't want to be seen on the recording, you're very welcome to take yourself off video. Just is really helpful for us to have content to go up on YouTube and Facebook so other people can get to see this. So the routine is, if you've got a question, to use the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. Just press on the button there and we'll be able to answer your questions. And Ellen is very quick out of the blocks. Ellen, nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you. Nice to see everybody. This just happened at the end of the conversation we were just having. There were three of us. I've never thought to ask you about this, Paul. So I've been with the center a very long time. I did start out with Alan. And one of the things that I am experiencing as being different about learning and sharing with others in the community. In the very beginning, when I was with Alan, I was under the impression that it was inappropriate to talk about my practice with others.
Okay.
And yet what I really enjoy, and I was saying that to the group I was just with now, is like, we actually were particularly talking about a pattern, that whatever, a way we were finding things going in meditation, and enjoying sharing and talking about it. And I really enjoyed doing that. And it just made me realize, ever since the beginning, I have felt like I am not supposed to have conversations like that. Could you please weigh in?
Weigh in. Firstly, well, I think generally speaking, Alan and Jackie's group was a lot younger. And so I think that would have played a part, because I think there would have been a certain degree of youthful folly in one-upmanship, in trying. I think it's a human quality, but certainly, there would have been an emphasis. There might very well have been an emphasis on one-upmanship, and also. It would, to a certain degree, it might detract from Alan and Jackie's authority, in the sense that people would start, instead of paying attention to the teacher, they'll start like talking across the teacher to one another and taking advice from one another. And that's like literally the blind leading the blind. I mean, not literally, but in terms of the Buddha's teaching, in terms of ignorance, absolutely. And so I can see why it would be detrimental in unskilled hands. But I'm also of the opinion that we're all grown adults. And if if people can't handle it, sort of, or they get the wrong end of the stick, or they fall into errors because they're talking to somebody else who doesn't know any more than them particularly, and they start taking advice from that person and it causes their practice to go wrong. Well, you've got to own it, I guess. You've got to own that and learn from the mistake. One of the things I do on Wednesday night at the Q&A at the centre, which is everyone is there physically, I won't put up with people talking across me to one another. They address me. I'm the teacher. That's my job. That's my role. And that helps streamline it all and helps everyone to recognize, especially newer people, where the channels of communication are and how to behave. So I think, an intelligent student will be able to talk to another student about the practice without necessarily being overly personal about what's going on in their own practice. But there will, of course, be elements of it in there, but they know that they go to the teacher who has the experience for proper guidance. And as long as there's that fairly nuanced understanding, then you shouldn't come to harm. And then you get what you want, which you've identified, which is the joy in sharing the Dhamma, which is a very laudable and noble thing.
Yes. Yes, that's what that was. You're right.
And
Well,
like,
thank you. That's very clear. That makes sense.
yeah,
Yep.
with anything that you've got an interest in, you want to be with like-minded people. That's why we're here this evening, isn't it?
Right.
So yeah, just be careful. Just be careful. Like if and also the other problem is comparison.
Oh, yeah.
You know, somebody else starts talking about, oh, they saw, non-self, and you go, well, I haven't seen non-self. And self-concern arises. There's a comparison. Well, they're doing really well. I'm not doing really well. Doubt arises. Confusion arises. So
Right.
you just have to be a bit careful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Robert, you got your hand up too.
Good evening, Paul. Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, my question was, towards the end of your book, Postcards from Beyond, there's the Dhamma talks.
Mm-hmm.
And the first part of those Dhamma talks is the question comes up about experimentation in meditation. And you say we've got to be prepared to live with uncertainty in meditation and take some risks that we might not exactly know what the outcome will be. And my question is, how do I experiment? I'm not too sure. At the moment, I sort of follow a fairly, I should imagine, orthodox procedure of trying to concentrate, trying to put my mindfulness on the breathing and trying to get some modicum of concentration, and then perhaps just watch whatever's arising mentally and physically and externally.
Is that helping?
Pardon?
Is that helping? Is it working?
I can't, I'm not sure. I don't know. But my question is, what what sort of thing would I do to experiment? And I know if you tell me it won't be an experiment, but I'm not sure how I would experiment.
Look, like there's such a wide variety of people that come to meditation. And not every nuanced instruction is relevant for everyone. There's a lovely quote of Ajahn Chah, who is questioned by his monks because he seems to give one set of instructions to one set of monks and another set of instructions to another set of monks. And this kind of relates back to what we were talking about with Ellen. So Ajahn Chah was saying, well, look, I'm watching you as you walk down a road, and some of you are veering to the left and some of you are veering to the right. So to some of you, I'm saying, veer right, and to others, I'm saying, veer left. And it's like, it's just, we just need to come into the middle ground, the middle way from an extreme position. Okay. So for some people who, I would say it's true of everyone that you have to meditate from a position of not knowing, that there has to be uncertainty. And what you've described is a prescribed way of meditating. There is a pattern, and you keep to the pattern no matter what. And yet you're struggling to tell me whether that has been successful for you.
Yes.
So really what you need to do is to ask yourself, why do I meditate? What is it that I want from meditation? And how does my understanding of the Buddha's teaching, how does that lead to what it is that I want? I would say the middle way for everyone is that we sit down in order to explore conscious experience as it's unfolding, in order to understand it. And we do that by mindfully noting all the ordinary components of our ordinary conscious experience. So it's hearing, it's tactile sensations, it's feelings, it's perceptions, it's thoughts, and we're just noting them.
Indeed, yes.
The experimental, the uncertainty and experimental aspect of that comes from knowing that you don't know, from coming from not having a prescribed way of doing things, but just sitting and resting content in the moment and allowing experience to arise without agenda.
Sorry?
Without an agenda of any kind.
Yeah.
Now, for some people, that is extraordinarily frightening, and they've got nothing. There's no straws to clutch onto. There's no apparent security in that, and so it can be very useful to say have a very light attention given to the breathing process as a way of just gently anchoring the mind.
Yeah.
But the emphasis is on watching things arise and pass away.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. And so I would say, don't overthink it. Not everything that you read in Dhamma terms is necessarily always specifically for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But getting clarification from the guy that wrote the book, I think, is a really good idea.
Yeah.
So keep doing what you're doing. I recommend for everyone coming and having a chat, either online or with me in person, every couple of months, just so these kinds of doubts and these kinds of issues can be brought out into the light and resolved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Dave, you've got your hand up.
Oh yeah, hi Paul. Yeah, I was just thinking about that sort of question as to why we meditate, and I was thinking the reason why I meditate has changed over the years, but then I was thinking it's actually the reason I meditate hasn't changed in the sense of it's because of this awareness of unsatisfactoriness and it's trying to seek something. But what I've found over the years is what I seek has changed. You know, from the beginning, when you sort of think, okay, well, I actually want to be, you know, calm or have control over the mind, into understanding that actually there's more depth to it than that. So it's just to kind of comment on that.
Are you clear about what it is?
I think it's
your purpose and your direction.
I think now I'm meditating because I want to come to an understanding, to come to an understanding about what is really real, about the true nature of experience. Whereas when I started, I was meditating because I wanted to have control and power and bliss and peace.
Oh, just those.
And I got all those, and then I thought, well, that's finished. You know, I've done that. I never got those.
Yeah. And then it's a question whether what you're being taught, because this relates back to what I was saying before the meditation, is what you're being taught aligned with your aspirations? Because it's not necessarily denying the validity of your aspirations, but is what is being taught actually what you're looking for? And I think sometimes people are under the impression it is, but as they get deeper into what is actually being taught, they discover, no, it's not, it's something different. So for instance, if we take the idea of concentration, samatha, calming meditation, and insight meditation, they are two different approaches. They have different aspirations. You can get extremely calm simply by attending to mindfully noting phenomena and observing that they arise and they pass away. If you do that in a systematic way, you will get calm, because as you see that things are transient, you realize I don't have to do anything. So there is no grasping, there is no resistance. The mind gets deeper and deeper into a concentrated state. And what the person does is they abandon then, as the mind starts to get properly absorbed, they abandon the observation of transience in order to get even more absorbed. Because if they keep observing transience, they won't get any more deeply concentrated, because their aspiration, whether they're clearly conscious of it or not, is concentration. Because there's this assumption that you get concentrated and then you move into all these alternative like states of mind that lead to enlightenment. The insight path, you get calm through looking at things arising and passing away, but instead of going down the concentration route, you continue down the route of mindful observation of phenomena and noting things arise and pass away, because understanding is your aspiration, not calm. So it's not an exclusive dichotomy. There's an element of calm required in order for there to be understanding. There's an element of understanding required if you want to get calm, but it's what is your overarching purpose? And so what generally happens is it all comes out in the mix, all comes out in the wash, as it were. And so your aspirations can indeed change. And if you have the wherewithal to actually listen to the Dhamma and listen to the teacher and listen to what is actually being explained, you realize that what is actually being explained isn't necessarily what you first came along for, but maybe it transcends it. Maybe it is a more important aspiration and goal. Yeah. So it can change over time. But I would say the most important thing, Dave, is that you have a clear, as best you can, a clear idea of what your own aspiration is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you have that, yeah, because the Buddha did teach samatha. I mean, clearly and obviously, but samatha was not in the end what gave him his enlightenment. Samatha were the supporting conditions, getting the mind into a soft, pliant, malleable state where he could then observe the arising and passing away of phenomena. And that's what led to his enlightenment, as it does for all of us. Okay. Hilda, you have your hand up.
Yes, so I'm curious about mindfulness, how it comes and goes, you know. Seems like some days it's very like strong, not just in the meditation, but like in everyday life.
Right.
But then it seems like I get like these extremes. So the next day is like really not very strong at all, rather than it being a bit like this, you know. It's more okay, goes like to the extremes. And I'm not sure if that's actually the case, or if I'm just more aware of whatever might be coming up. But if you could maybe say something about like what we can do to help it be more strong, or can we do anything? Because I'm just curious about those two.
Yeah.
Like polar opposites sometimes.
Yes.
But it seems to depend on the day, you know. Okay, it's like a day of strong mindfulness, and then the next day, oh wow, it's like I've never meditated in my life, you know.
Yeah, it's galling, isn't it? It's just really, how can that? Mindfulness is transient. Mindfulness is part of the weave of conscious experience, just as much as tactile sensations, perceptions, thoughts, feelings, tastes, touches, smell. mindfulness is a mental quality. It is a mental formation. It's it's included in the aggregate of mental formations. It ultimately does exist. It is also transient. It has to be transient, as every aspect of experience, conscious experience, has to be transient. And so firstly, we have to factor that in. Mindfulness arises, there's in the books, it talks about clear comprehension of non-delusion. And essentially what that boils down to is, like, when mindfulness arises, it's not me, it's not mine, it's simply arising because the conditions allow it in that moment. Now, definitely one of the conditions that allows it is the intention to be mindful, the desire to be mindful, but there are an awful lot of other conditions at work as well, some of which support the arising of mindfulness and the development of mindfulness, and other conditions that counteract that and act against it and make it less likely you're going to be mindful. So it's all very unsatisfactory.
Mm.
However, if you're willing to factor that in, that recognition, and you recognize that it's not your fault when there isn't as much mindfulness as there was yesterday, that it's a change in conditions. It's not me, it's not mine, it's a change in conditions.
Right.
And then you work patiently in order to develop your mindfulness as best you can now. And this is one of the one of the interesting aspects of this whole, the practical application to following the path and practicing mindfulness, is what are the necessary supporting conditions for mindfulness.
Mm.
The desire to be mindful is strongly up there as one of the prime conditions. And sometimes it's not so easy. It doesn't come as easily. So you just have to be patient. You have to decide that it's not a question of resistance. It's not a question of blame. It's not a question of failing at all. It's just today, it's not so easy. It doesn't come as easily. So I'm just going to have to be patient and work at it. And it's just one of those days. It's one of those days where it doesn't come so easily. And then tomorrow it comes easily. And you have to treat them almost as, like they're both imposters. It's like, if it's going really, really well today, you have the understanding and the knowledge, oh, but that doesn't mean it's going to be like that tomorrow.
Right.
And tomorrow, when it's not so good, you have the understanding, well, it's not always going to be like this. The day after, it might well be good again. And you're just, and where it starts with mindfulness is the intention to be mindful.
Mm.
It's got to start somewhere. Yeah. So and the knowledge that you haven't been mindful, again, is not a failing. It's just an observation of the reality, which was the absence of mindfulness. And that can be the prompt to then say, all right, well, let's practice mindful noting now. And then to undertake it with as simply as you possibly can. So say, coming to the foundation of mindfulness of body, and just say, okay, so what can I be aware in terms of body, in terms of tactile sensations, in terms of sounds? Yeah, just keeping it to something very simple in order just to help create the better supporting conditions. But it seems to me that it's got to start somewhere, so and it starts with the desire, the intention to mindfully note. Does that help, Hilda?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, such a. I think the books talk about there being, I can't recall them, specific conditions for the arising of mindfulness. I can't bring them to mind at the moment, but the desire to practice mindfulness, I think, is absolutely key.
I think maybe what happens is that if it's a day when I notice that, okay, it's a little bit easier today, then everything just flows, like life is a bit easier. And then on the days when it's not that easy, then everything's a bit of a struggle, and then the contrast is very obvious, you know.
Yes, there's probably more hindrances around, probably more resistance around. But also, here's another point, like with the practice, generally speaking, it's like we learn the most when it's most difficult. We learn the least when it's flowing easily.
Right.
You know, when it's flowing, it's kind of telling us that we've got it right. And where's the learning in that? It's not. And then when we're struggling to get the mindfulness together, that's when we're really making the big learning, definitely. And then gradually, and then the whole thing is based on comparison, isn't it? And gradually, the extremes between a day when there's no mindfulness and a day when it flows easily, the oscillation between that lessens and lessens, and it's like riding a bike. The variation lessens and lessens and lessens until you're just sort of like flowing in a reasonable way.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hilda. Peter, you got your hand up.
Yes, I was wondering about the significance of samadhi being the 8th factor of the path.
Right concentration.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could give us some reflection on the fact that it's the very last bit of the path.
It's not linear. Those 8 factors. So I'm picking myself up from your. Sorry, that's really awkward. Thanks. It's not linear. All 8. It's not the final stage. Well, I know we're talking about them as steps, but each of the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path are developed together. So if we break it down simply into ethics, mental development, and wisdom, you have to have the wisdom to start the practice in the first place. So the wisdom training comes first, if you like. And we learn to keep precepts. So that's the ethical side of things. And then in order to be able to keep the precepts properly, you have to develop mindfulness, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And so they start to feed into one another. The more you practice meditation, the more clearly skillful and unskillful actions are seen. And so that's the wisdom that enables us to act more skillfully in the world. Acting more skillfully in the world then enables us to be more comfortable in our own skins when we sit down to meditate. There's less waves in our lives that are going to less problems, less issues, which means we can sit more comfortably, which means we can deepen our mindfulness and deepen our concentration, which then starts to show us more about how life really unfolds, how conscious experience really unfolds, which of course is developing our wisdom. So there is no first and last path factor. It's not in series. They're all developed in tandem. Does that help, Peter? Yeah, you have to.
Sorry, I got a bit confused with my controls. Yes, I think that more or less says it. It's a kind of when the samadhi is good, you know, you're doing everything else right. It's a kind of a cherry on the cake. It's an indication that you're getting your mindfulness right. I mean,
well, it depends.
Right. It's right this, right that, and right the other. And right samadhi means that you're getting everything right.
It depends. It depends, because it can be so easy to fall into the trap of believing that because I'm concentrated, that's the sign of success in insight, but it isn't at all. It's a sign that you're getting concentrated. Is the person observing the fact that concentration is a transient state? As we were discussing before, mindfulness is a transient state. Is somebody going to get conceited on the basis that they got concentrated? You know, how does the arising of concentration lead to the reduction in self-concern overall? How does it help somebody see through the illusion of duality? You need wisdom for that. So the concentration is only a support for the wisdom, which is what I was saying about the Buddha himself. He came out of the fourth jhana before he became enlightened. Going into the first, second, third, fourth jhana and coming out was to cleanse his mind, was to purify his mind. He then attended to what was actually taking place in his experience and immediately saw the truth of life as it really is. Okay, so that's wisdom, that's not concentration. So you have to be a little bit careful. Undoubtedly, when we get concentrated, because we're watching things arise and pass away, that is extremely pleasurable. Pleasurable interest arises, fascination arises. The meditation can seem like it's just happening by itself. It's a beautiful experience. But we mustn't get confused. There's a stage on the insight path called knowledge of what is and what is not the path. And it follows on from what's called the corruptions of insight. And the corruption of insight is when we see things arising and passing away to such a degree that the mind becomes truly concentrated and the meditator says, this is the path. And they've chosen the wrong path. They've chosen the path of concentration. And the path, so it's knowledge of what is and is not the path requires the renunciation of concentration in favor of the understanding that comes from continuing the path of insight. And continuing the path of insight from that point on becomes an extremely rough and difficult process. It's where we start to go into knowledge of dissolution, which brings up knowledge of fear, knowledge of misery, knowledge of disgust. They are all signs of progress. Knowledge of fear, knowledge of misery, knowledge of disgust at formations, at the nature of conscious experience as not being a suitable vehicle for happiness, genuine, lasting happiness and security, right? So this is a really important point. So nothing to do with concentration. Concentration was not a sign of insight development. Knowledge of misery, knowledge of fear, knowledge of disgust are. So you have to bear that in mind. All right, thanks, Peter. I did get a question that was given to me over Facebook Messenger, so I'll quickly read this out for you. The question is, at the ultimate level, there is no world, is there? There was an intellectual appreciation of this, but there was an experiential seeing of this recently. So the world gets constructed by our thinking, ? Again, the seeing into the arising and passing away would seem to substantiate that understanding. So that needs a little bit of clarification. At the ultimate level, there is no world, is there? So it depends what we mean by world. If we mean that there is we can only find that there are objects that can be consciously known in the moment and that they are simply arising and passing away and never repeat, then absolutely we see that there is no world in the conventional sense at that level. But it doesn't mean the world goes away. The conventional world still exists. It's all part of the magic, the magic trick of reality. The question then was, so the world gets constructed by our thinking. The conventional world does not get constructed by our thinking alone. This is such a subtle point, actually. The conventional world consists of the conceptual plus the ultimate, in the sense that the conventional world includes all our concepts about things, but it also includes the sense of touch, the sense of smell, the sense of sight, the sense of hearing, etc. It includes thinking and feelings and perceptions, all of which are ultimately real, but they also feature in the conventional world as well. So the conventional world is constructed, is weaved from the ultimate building blocks, influencing and conditioning one another endlessly. Yeah. We fall into a trap of believing that mind constructs the world. If we fall into that trap, then we have to ask, well, in that case, if mind is constructing the world, what's constructing the mind? And so we fall into another fallacy, another mistaken intellectual idea. The conventional reality is the conventional reality. The ultimate reality is ultimate reality. We shouldn't get confused between the two. Ultimate reality consists of those things which actually exist. Yeah. What actually exists are sights and sounds, tastes, touches and smells. Thoughts do exist. Feelings, perceptions do exist. Memories do arise. And there is the conscious knowing of the thought, the feeling, the perception, the sound, the taste, the touch. But every component part at the ultimate level has the nature to arise due to conditions and cease. In its arising, it conditions, and in its ceasing, it conditions. And the whole of reality is constructed moment by moment. And as the mind clarifies and becomes calm in meditation, and you practice the observation of things arising and passing away, that becomes self-evident. So we need to be careful about drawing intellectual conclusions based on a small representative sample of real experience. If we're practicing Vipassana, we need to not see things arise and pass away 100 times, not 1,000 times. We need to see things arise and pass away 100,000 times. Every component part of it. That's why it has duration over time. That's why it takes years to do this. For some people, lifetimes to do it. Yeah. So we're chipping away at the wrong perception that things are permanent and stable. We're chipping away at the perception that things are satisfactory and graspable. We're chipping away at the assumption of selfhood in all these component parts of reality. Seeing that indeed they are arising due to impersonal conditions. There is no me, no mine, no self required for conscious experience to occur. Once you've properly seen and corrected all those perceptions, then there's a possibility of seeing the magic. That this is all being wonderfully, magically constructed moment by moment. Annie, you have your hand up. Yeah, you need to put your, you need to take yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Nice to see you, Annie.
Hello, coming back to this mountain problem. You're saying, sorry, I don't, I can't, mountains. You're talking about conventional reality and unconventional reality.
Ultimate reality.
Sorry?
Ultimate reality.
ultimate reality. I don't know. I'm getting a bit blown away here, because are you actually saying mountains are not ultimately real?
Well, when you say a mountain, if somebody is interested to find out, what they need to do is develop their insight sufficiently that they understand seeing and shape and color and hearing and sounds and tactile sensations and consciousness of touch, that they understand perceptions and they understand thinking, and then they can go and look at a mountain and they can deconstruct it into shape and color, tactile sensations, perceptions, and they're able to see that the shape and color is impermanent, the tactile sensations are impermanent, the perceptions and consciousness are impermanent. And then through that process, they see that indeed there is no mountain there. And yet at the same time, they also see that there is indeed a mountain there. It just depends whether they're looking at it in the conventional sense or the ultimate sense. But we can't lose sight of the reason why the Buddha is suggesting we go on this path of insight. And the reason is to free the mind from grasping and craving for life to be different than it is, by showing us through this insight work the true nature of reality, that it's not what you thought it was. So you don't have to take my word for it, Annie.
That's all right.
You don't have to take anyone's word for it. So there's an expression. It goes, look, I don't know where it comes from, but it goes along this line. At first, men are men, mountains are mountains, and trees are trees. Then, during the course of this training, you discover that there are no men, there are no mountains, there are no trees. Then at the conclusion of the training, you discover that there are indeed men, mountains, and trees, but nobody's confused by the terms.
Thank you.
Okay. It is a beguiling teaching, the higher teaching. It is taking the student out of their comfort zone, out of their assumptions. It's not for the faint-hearted. You have to be brave, because it is going to show you that life is not what you thought it was. The whole purpose of the Buddha's teaching, the entire Buddha's teaching is founded on the Buddha's discovery of what's called avijja, ignorance. It is the ignorant assumption about the nature of the world that causes craving, and it's the craving that causes suffering. So for everyone who decides that they want to follow the insight path, to follow Buddha's higher teaching, you have to be aware that your baseline assumptions about the way that you thought life was will come under intense scrutiny through your own explorations, from your own discoveries of observing how it is that experience is being put together moment by moment. It is, as the Buddha himself said, a conjurer's trick. It's not the real, solid, substantial thing you thought it was. It's better. It is a wonderful hallucination. So any more for any more? This is why I say, because in reality, all there is are these finite magical displays, and they are the expression of the infinite mystery. And it's the failure to comprehend that all that's happening, there is no narrative, there is no story, there is only the finite displays of infinite mystery. That's all there is. And it's all unfolding beautifully, naturally. It flows. It doesn't require us to passionately desire things to be different at all. That is the work of ignorance. It's ignorance, being ignorant of the infinite mystery, that causes us to fall into the trap of believing that somehow there is something that needs to be fixed and changed. I should be different. You should be different. They should be different. And it's all based in ignorance. The reality is that's not required at all. All that's required is the willingness to be mindfully observant and to go through this training of having your perceptions clarified and cleaned up, and the wrong perceptions and the wrong views that come from those wrong perceptions let go of. And once that's complete, then the mystery is revealed. All right. I'm not getting any more hands going up, so unless anyone else has another observation, we'll leave it there for tonight. Oh, Giuseppe, hello. You didn't want it to end, Giuseppe, so you need to come off mute. You're off. I'm not getting you still.
Am I not coming through?
Oh, you're coming through now, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Right.
But yeah, lovely to see you, and thank you very much. But yeah, I just wanted to make a point. I was in the breakout room, and I apologize in advance if my questioning doesn't make sense, because sometimes I start a question and then I get totally confused and I don't know where I end up. But it was, I just totally love, there's one thing that's niggled me slightly, in the sense of when I, over the many years of reading the books and all of that, and I love the stories. And one of the stories that I truly love was the story of the Buddha when he was looking at the field being ploughed. Oh, sorry, it was in the stories of him coming up to enlightenment, and then it said he thought about a time that he was a child or something watching his father plough a field. And right. I don't know if that makes sense at all. Maybe I'm totally confusing the situation here, but do you remember that story from the Teachings of the Buddha or something? No.
Yeah, so as I understood it, and again, yeah, we want to go back and double check to make sure we got it right, but it was the memory of, wasn't he sitting under a bush or something?
Yeah.
He went into the first jhana.
Or, well, I think this is now linking this question to this whole thing, confusion over concentration and insight and stuff. But it's just, I loved that story, but I always thought to myself, the niggle was, why would they bring up this story about the Buddha, thinking back to a time where he knew what was the path and what was not the path, when he's just relaxed watching a ploughing festival going or something, or his dad ploughing the festival.
Well, it's just before the moment of his enlightenment, isn't it? So
yeah.
So essentially, because you got to have it in context. He's just done this whole eating one grain of rice a day aestheticism, and he's realized that he's 1,000th part dead and 1 part alive. This is not the way to realize enlightenment. Okay.
Yes.
And so he's done all the jhanas.
Yeah.
Everything that is possible to do with concentration, he's done before he went into his austere phase. He's then gone in. So he said, well, it's not there, which is a point that needs to be reiterated.
Yes.
Then he's gone and said, well, okay, well, maybe it's through, extreme mortification. So he goes and takes that as far as it's possible to go, and he realizes it's not there at all. And then he has this memory of, I can't remember. I think he has somebody comes and gives him some rice pudding or some
rice milk.
Rice milk. So He has something restorative. And during that process of reflection, he remembers this time when he was just sitting on, was it under a rose bush or something like that,
Yeah.
while his father was ploughing, and he had spontaneously gone into a jhana.
Right.
I think it was something along those lines.
Yes.
And I think there's something about, he realized that he'd almost, to coin a phrase, he'd almost thrown out the baby with the bathwater when it comes to concentration.
Yes.
So I think he realized that, oh, what I need to do is to purify my mind completely and come out of that, and then attend to what I haven't done so far, which is just looking at, so instead of trying to get somewhere, like
Yes.
trying to get enlightened,
Yes.
all I'm going to do is just to use the concentration to clean out, and then just be here.
Yes.
And find out what this is.
Yes.
I'm paraphrasing terribly, but I think that's, so he'd seen what the two extremes were, and he realized he could use the concentration up to a certain point, but he had to come out of that then, and instead of trying to get somewhere, I will just look at what is actually here.
Yes. Yes.
And because his mind was so utterly powerful, it didn't take him very long. So he instantaneously saw Paticca Samuppada in that moment. He instantaneously saw the five aggregates. He instantaneously saw the entirety of reality.
Yes.
And understood it all in context and had the complete picture. And it would have been there. That's the thing. It's here all the time. It's not something that you have to become.
Yes.
It's already, you're just ignoring it.
Yes.
And that's, so the whole basis of his teaching was, oh, I was ignoring. The reality was there the whole time, and I was just ignoring it because I was so busy trying to become enlightened.
Yes. Yes. Well,
so
I'm
he needed
so grateful.
He needed the clarity.
Yeah.
Get from the jhanas.
Yes.
The just getting rid of all the muck from the mind. So he's got absolutely pristine mind. And then he just sits and observes.
I
And
really appreciate that explanation, because I think that has hit the nail on the head for me. The overriding desire to get something is what the story is telling us was the problem.
Yes.
And when he realized that, then he went, okay, well, there was this time where I was just naturally sitting there and everything was fine. It worked, or whatever, I mean, as you've just said,
Yeah.
But it's just it's so wonderful to hear you say that. It seemed to make much more sense to me now that you say it in that way, because I can see in myself that there is a propensity to have this agenda and carry this agenda with me everywhere and not really quite realize that it's there.
It's right here. And all the information you need is always available. I was talking a couple of weeks ago in a talk on a Wednesday about how the Buddha uses his famous handful of leaves analogy, and he's in the forest and he picks up the handful of leaves and says, which is more, all the leaves in this great forest, all the leaves that I hold in my hand. And the point he was making was, well, what I'm teaching you is equivalent to the leaves in my hand. What I know about is equivalent to the leaves in the forest, but it doesn't pertain to overcoming suffering, so I'm not mentioning it. And the point I was making is, well, what did he do with the handful of leaves after he used it for that illustration? Of course, he just dropped the leaves, because the leaves are everywhere. Everything that you need in order to understand the true nature of reality is occurring in this moment. You're just ignoring it. And because we don't have the power of a Buddha, because we're just normal folk, it just takes time to realize that, all we're being asked to do is attend to conscious experience as it's unfolding and just mindfully note what's there, free of any agenda, free of trying to get somewhere, because it's all here. We're in the forest right now. It's just so that's so it just takes time. And so you just have to be willing to, because you sit down to meditate and the mind just goes rushing off on its next becoming. I want to become this, I want to become that. So
absolutely.
So it's just learning, just taking the time to keep coming back to the moment, keep coming back to resting content in the moment in order to simply mindfully note things as they arise and pass away. It
Thank
really
you.
is that simple.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
you just need the ethics, and you need the mental development, and you need the mundane skills in order to not to get in trouble, in order to have, enough mental space just to be able to sit regularly and pay attention to what's unfolding in conscious experience spontaneously.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and the insights will arise if you're mindfully noting. They just will.
Yes. I really, really appreciate that. I'm going to take that. That's one of those things where you note it. Agenda. Thank you.
Yeah. Good stuff. Thanks, Giuseppe. Well, I think we've accomplished a lot tonight, so hope you enjoyed that and got something from that. It really is a phenomenal teaching. It really is. Yeah, we'll get together in a couple of weeks. If you'd like to do a sutta, if there's a short extract from the Pali Canon that you'd like us to go through, you're very welcome to email us and let us know what that is, and I'll see if we can do it just for the variety. Other than that, unless anyone's got any other questions or observations, I think we'll call it a night.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, thank
Thanks,
you, Paul.
Hilda. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.